Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to WatchYouWant.com. Thanks for logging on. Now, depending on your perspective, what you're looking at is either a Panerai wannabe or the last true military Panerai from the historic combat diver tradition of that company. And your opinion on that matter is going to depend on whether you feel that the lineage resides with the company name or the personnel involved in the original combat dive watches. And to that end, this watch right here, the Ennebi Fondale Model 9650, represents more or less a continuation of the designs by the designers of the original Panerai military supplier. Now, during the early 1980s, Alessandro Bettarini, who was a fabricator, a materials specialist, a prototyper of mechanical devices, joined the Panerai company when it was still a military supplier. By that point, they weren't doing much work with watches. They were involved in radio equipment, aircraft landing gear, underwater navigation equipment, underwater torches and compasses, utility gear, but they did still have a minor interest in watches. And during the early 1980s, when he first joined the company, there was talk A, of commercializing the watches for the first time, which had never been done before, and B, of producing a new generation of Italian Navy combat dive watch to be built by Panerai, but using modern technology. And he mocked up a prototype, which has since become known as the Panerai Millemetri. And it was constructed entirely of titanium, much in the image of some of the last of the Panerai combat divers, but completely different fabrication, completely different construction methodology. Basically, it was superficially similar, but mechanically completely distinct. That watch never saw the light of day. After being shown as a prototype in 1985, it effectively disappeared, and within 8 years, the Panerai company had taken the brand public, taken the brand civilian, and only about 12 years after the debut of the Millemetri, Bettarini had left Panerai, and this was the end of the so-called pre-Vendôme period, when Panerai, as a luxury watch manufacturer, was sold to the Richemont Group. But Bettarini and his friend Luciano Ninceri, who had also been involved in Panerai, decided to strike out on their own and found their own company in the tradition of Panerai, the military watch supplier. And that watch company, Enebi, debuted in 2004. Now, as of 2005-2006, they commenced production of their debut model, the Fondale, and the model 9650, which you see here, is effectively the embodiment of everything Ninceri and Bettarini developed with Panerai during the 1980s. If you search Panerai Millemetri prototype on Google, you will get an image of a watch that looks almost exactly like this. And the bottom line is, this is the living embodiment of the military Panerai dive watches. This is largely the unbroken continuity, and it starts with this huge 47mm grade 5 PVD titanium case. This is the beating heart, movement aside, of the Fondale, and it's a monster. First of all, it's huge. It's thick, it's broad, but like the large Panerai 1940 and 1950 cases, it sits surprisingly light on the wrist. You can wear this with a girly wrist like I have. And I gotta say, if you've got the kind of wrist to handle something huge like one of the 44mm offshores or an Hublot 48mm Big Bang King Power, this is perfect for you. Because it is grade 5 titanium, it's exceptionally light. It's big, but it doesn't wear big. It can get along with a lot of different wrist shapes. Again, it'll coexist with a small wrist. On a huge wrist, it absolutely dominates. It is a bold look. And the bottom line is, this watch wears just like a Panerai, so if you're familiar with those, you're going to like the Ennebi Fondale. It's got a lot more going on, though. There's some original thinking in this watch that Panerai never embraced, and as a result, was never able to benefit from. And that starts with the crown, which is not only huge, knurled, and easy to grip, but it's neither a locking lever nor a screw down. This despite the fact that the watch has a 1,000 meter depth rating, and I find that extraordinary. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the convenience of a crown that's always accessible, that winds and sets freely, and you get the resilience and even the protection that you would get with the Panerai locking lever, because these crown guards are huge. I mean, these things could stop everything except a shotgun slug. So you're protected. And the watch also features a unique bezel. Now, when fully in place, the bezel can turn, but you have to you have to drop it. That's the thing. You can hear a little click. Now the bezel won't turn. When you drop it, put pressure on it, it becomes bidirectional. But once it's clicked into place, it won't turn. Very secure. I'd say the only flaw here is that the bezel itself is not loomed, but the dial glows like a torch in the dark. It features very attractive modified baton hands. They actually have segments to them that make them present a little bit like vintage cathedral hands, and it's a charming look. Now the dial itself is highly legible in light or dark. It's very simple, it's very tool-like, it has an honest blue-collar military utility to it that is essential to the appeal of the traditional Panerai combat divers, and in some cases has been lost by some of the more complicated and ornate modern Panerai references. I don't think you'll ever see an Enebi made in gold, and that's the way they're going to keep it. This is a tool watch, a utility watch, a practical watch in the finest tradition of Italian watchmaking. And to that I will add, this is an Italian-made watch. Only some of the earliest Panerai watches were actually built in Italy. In the pre-Vendôme period, the first flight of watches sold to the public were made in Switzerland. The second flight, made between the first and the Vendôme purchase, were actually made in Italy, in Florence, and that is the case with the Ennebi Fondale. It's made in Prato. Everything from the case to the buckle to the strap itself, which is a beautiful piece of handmade, hand-stitched leather, as only the Italians can render leather. It's about 4 millimeters thick. This is a seriously beefy strap on a seriously beefy case, and all of it is of Italian origin, and that was part of the heart of the Enebi concept. Keep Italian watchmaking alive. Now inside is a Swiss movement, 2824, very tough. It's Swiss, it's tough, it's made by Swatch, and it's what you'll find in a whole host of watches from Omega to Breitling, and it's absolutely up to the task. If you had to bet your life on just one movement in a high impact, high adversity situation, the 2824 is an absolute tank to match the watch itself. Now, the strap is unique in that it features a diagonal stitching pattern. I can't say enough good things about the strap. First of all, it feels like an Italian leather jacket, maybe an Italian leather motorcycle jacket, so very tough in the hands. It has a smoothness and appeal to it that evokes the finest Italian leather shoes. It's a really special piece. And even the buckle, which features a roller at the end, allows you to pull this watch tight when it's on the wrist with one hand. Original thinking, very practical, and just the kind of original ideas, thoughtful detailing that make this Enebi a standout and really set it apart from, the Panerai watches. One feature that it does share in common with the Panerai watches is the 24mm lug spacing. So if you're Paneristi and you like to swap straps, this watch is good to go with any strap that you can put on a standard 24mm lug luminor. So your 44mm luminors, any strap that'll fit those will fit this Enebi. So you have a lot of options out there. And I would advise you to give this strap a chance before you go swapping, because even the minders on this thing feel like they're made of saddle quality leather. They are big, they're tough, and they're fine, and they're gorgeous. I like everything about this watch. I'm not necessarily a Panerai fan. I respect the watches. I think this Enebi is a little bit more emotional to me because it gets to the heart of the Italian watchmaking tradition. It gets closer to the core of the Panerai story, and because some of the same people were involved in this watch and the last generation of Panerai combat divers, I just find the Enebi story a bit more compelling. So if you like the Panerai look, but you want to set yourself apart from the crowd and get in touch with that original Florentine watchmaking tradition, you cannot do better than this Ennebi Fondale, available through watchyouwant.com.